What's good, everybody? This is Chris Nation 4 here. Today, we'll be checking out every event that's going to be happening throughout our lifetime. This is very interesting because I was born in 2004, so currently I am going to be 22 in a couple weeks. And there's not a lot of events that happen throughout my, lifetime. Throughout my 22 years of on this earth, right? And there's going to be some brand new events that I never got to witness or see, throughout my entire lifetime, as we, go throughout this timeline, as we go deeper and deeper into the future. I get to experience this one day if I have kids or I have my grandkids or my great great grandkids, or by the time I'm literally to 100, you know, I want to witness most of these events by the time, I pass away. But yeah, this is every rare space event we'll actually see before we die. I know this is going to be a very dark video, but still, we're going to put some lot of space, interests and just knowledge about the universe and the cosmos. But anyway, without further ado, the link will be in the description down below. Let's get started. This is every rare space event we'll actually see before we die.
Remember these dates.
Here we go.
Well, why is that important? Usually, we look up at the night sky and see an absolutely still, peaceful picture. It feels like the universe has hit pause, but that's a grand
Yep.
illusion, right?
That's an illusion because we may think that just 1 year alone. I mean, it seems forever. It's 52 weeks long, and it does seem forever. And then that's 5 years. That seems forever. But if you realize, though, as we see everything in space at a different perspective, we know that in an astrological, point of view, everything around us is much faster, and it happens at a very instant that we see. If you're going to some other planet that's 4 light years away, I mean, your perspective changes than how, some your twin brother is on Earth, and you're up in space. I mean, each of theirs has a different perspective to how they see things. The person on Earth, you know, sees the time first, I think, and then the person up in space sees the time how they see it up in space. As they're speeding along, and they age much faster than it is here on Earth. So everything is changing at a different perspective because it seems long to us, but everything else in an astrological standpoint seems much shorter.
Right now, for example, an asteroid the size of a skyscraper is hurtling towards us at breakneck speed.
No.
In a neighboring constellation, a dead star has reached critical mass and is about to light up the sky with a thermonuclear explosion. Meanwhile, our very own moon is about to take a brutal hit, and we'll watch the flash in real time. The craziest part, these main shows won't happen in some abstract future, but right within our lifetimes. To see the first one, you won't even have to wait decades or even years because it's happening right now in 2026.
Okay.
If you look at the constellation Corona Borealis, you'll see a bright new star. It shines almost as bright as Polaris, even though just yesterday there was no visible star there at all. It seems like the night sky has simply been adorned with another bright little dot. But don't let that fool you. Hidden behind this steady light.
Okay, so our night sky changes all the time. We always have new stars, new constellations, depends on what hemisphere you are. But the thing is, why everything has changed in our night sky often. But if you're just deeper in the mountains or deeper where there's no light pollution, you're seeing the entire Milky Way galaxy itself. If you're just far away stargazing, you just notice that every single day there's always a different position. Well, the reason why you see a different position is because we're the ones that are moving throughout the cosmos. Our sun, but our entire solar system moves around the Milky Way galaxy, and they orbit once every 250 million years. Last time it happened was when Pangea and then the first ancestors of the dinosaurs appeared on Earth. And it kept going and going and going. And then, what's going to happen in 250 million years from now? That's going to be a different story. Because it's that every 250 million year cycle. Let's see what else. So the sun, throughout its entire lifespan, from 4.6 billion years onward to today, has only completed 22 entire revolutions around the Milky Way. So, considering that, from our perspective, the sun is 22 years old. But in reality, it's 4.6 billion years old. It's only at its halfway between its lifespan. It only has about 20 years left, or 20 revolutions around the Milky Way before it becomes a red giant.
Is the epicenter of a colossal catastrophe. In the T Corona Borealis system, a super dense little white dwarf orbits in tandem with a massive red giant. They're so close to each other that for decades, the dwarf's gravity has been siphoning off its neighbor's gas. All this hydrogen accumulates on the dwarf's surface. Temperature and pressure build up until they reach a.
And the thing is with binary pair stars is that it's always a seesaw on who becomes the most dominant star versus who is the weaker star until, like I said, they gather their mass from each other, vice versa, to become who's more dominant than the other. It's that constant battle that happens all the time. And most stars actually were binary pair stars. They were once formed as binary pair stars, but I mean, it's most stars. There are some stars that are not binary pair stars, but the sun maybe had a binary pair star at one point. It's just uncertain where it is because I think we call it Nemesis. Nemesis lies on the very outskirts of their solar system. That's very, very far away. So something happened to it to fill up our star, or in some instances where when the sun became more dominant than its twin pair, it forced that twin away from the solar system, and it became the sun today, as it during its formation 4.6 billion years ago.
Critical point. The outcome is predictable. A massive thermonuclear explosion. What looks from Earth like a mere twinkling little star is actually an expanding wall of plasma, heated to millions of degrees. But here's the most fascinating part. The explosion itself occurred 3,000 years ago.
True.
It took that light all this time to cross the void and reach us here.
It took 3,000 years to get for that light to get to us. So here's another example. If you look at Orion constellation and you look to the left, there's the Orion's armpit or the shoulder area, and you see that there's a big star. It's a star called Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse is 642 light years away, and this is a red giant that's always been kind of in the news in the astronomy world, where this is a star that's nearing its lifespan. It's a star that's only 10 million years old, but it's a massive star that's about to go supernova, because big stars don't last as long as dwarf stars like our sun. Because, like I said, once they're born, they already shed off most of its fuel, and by the time it ages, it's already near at the end of its own life. So this star, Betelgeuse, only has about 100,000 years of its life left, of itself, unless if there is a companion star that can conserve the field, but there's no recollection of other of a binary pair star around Betelgeuse. It's just, yeah, I don't think there's anything. But due to recent discoveries of Betelgeuse in the last couple years, since 2021, is that this star has been widely dimming. So if you look at, there's a star chart from 2019, considering that from January 2019 to January 2020, this star has been widely dimming. So this is a star that's shedding up its outer layers, leaving behind trails of dust and matter. That's what's causing most of that dimming, because it's literally just dying. It's shedding off most of its outer layers as if it's a red giant. It's shedding off all these outer layers and becoming its own nebula someday. And by the time that core fuses heavier and heavier, once it gets to iron and beyond, boom, it goes supernova.
Today, soon this light will fade and the dwarf will go back to doing its devouring work in the dark. But cosmic events don't just change the night sky. True darkness will descend upon Earth in broad daylight in August 2027. The sun will go out. It sounds like a regular solar eclipse, an amusing astronomical trick lasting a couple of minutes, but this time the mechanics of the cosmos will align with eerie perfection. The sun will go out for an incredible 6 minutes and 23 seconds. It'll be the longest remaining total eclipse of the entire century. On that exact day, the moon will approach the Earth to its closest possible distance, becoming massive in our sky. Meanwhile, the Earth will move away from the sun to its farthest possible distance. As a result, the giant lunar disk will easily cover up our tiny star with room to spare. Such a perfect alignment of orbits is an incredible rarity. A pitch-black shadow, nearly 300 kilometers wide, will slice across the planet from southern Spain to Yemen. It'll plunge the Egyptian pyramids in Luxor into darkness and sweep directly over Mecca. What's more, the shadow will race across the planet at a terrifying speed of around 2,500 kilometers per hour. You couldn't outrun this darkness even on a Boeing passenger jet plane. But 6 minutes later, light will return. Of course, as eerie as an eclipse might seem, it's an entirely and completely safe phenomenon.
Dang. So the longest on average for a solar eclipse is it's a few minutes. The longest one was in July of somewhere in July of 2009, where it only or the longest it had was almost it's just shy of 7 minutes. I think the nearest the long one that's going to happen in the future is in the 2100s, July 16, 21 something.
That astronomers can predict down to the second. The problem is, there are things in space whose orbits are much more difficult to predict. And just a year and a half later, in April of 2029, an asteroid the size of a skyscraper will approach the Earth. And it's heading straight into our satellite zone.
Okay, so he's talking about Apophis. So there's people that say that Apophis is actually going to collide into Earth and destroy stuff. There's going to be people that are going to be fear, but here's the thing. In reality, Earth is always getting bombarded by asteroids on a daily basis. Earth hurtles through thousands of those, big and small. And yes, they do interrupt the satellites and all that stuff that orbits around Earth, right? Now, when you're dealing with a skyscraper-sized object, right? This is an object that they once said that this asteroid is actually going to hit Earth, but they rethinked everything. And they claim that this is not going to be a collision at all, because if you realize that how its velocity is, because if the object is too slow, then the Earth's pull will pull it in and collide, right? If it's too fast, right, it can get flung off of Earth. But if it moves at the right speed to the point where it can get its closest approach to Earth, but it will still collide with the satellites and all that stuff, that's what the right velocity of that asteroid will become. It will just be very, very close to where most of the satellites kind of orbit in that lower to mid Earth orbit range. That's what they experience. It's not going to be a collision. It's just going to be a clip.
April 13th, 2029. Apophis, an asteroid the size of the Empire State Building, will fly by Earth. In the early 2000s, astronomers seriously considered the chance of it colliding with our planet. An impact of that force would wipe an entire continent off the face of the planet.
Yeah, that's not gonna
But then, thankfully, the calculations were refined. There will be no collision. But it'll pass at a distance of just 32,000 kilometers. That's 12 times closer than the moon. Apophis will dive even closer than our ring of weather and communication satellites that are flying around up there orbiting the Earth. And amazingly, in Europe and Africa, you'll be able to see it with your naked eye just by looking up, a glowing dot sliding rapidly across the night sky. At the moment of closest approach, Apophis won't just fly by. Earth is a gravitational heavyweight. When the asteroid enters our zone of influence, the planet's tidal forces will literally begin tearing it apart. Gravity will pull on the near side of Apophis much harder than on the far side. This will trigger massive asteroid quakes, or should we call them Apophis quakes? Anyway, Earth will warp the shape of this rock, as well as alter its rotation and permanently rewrite its orbit. But objects without Earth's immense mass and lacking a dense atmosphere don't stand a chance, which is exactly what our moon is going to experience firsthand in 2032.
Mm-hmm.
For months, astronomers...
And that event as well, like I said, the Earth and the Moon always experience collisions with big and small objects as they, have objects like these little meteorite and asteroid objects that are in the orbits. It always happens. I think the Artemis 2 crew actually captured a few of these little meteorites that bombard the moon. I mean, that was kind of a really cool sight to see about that. But again, the moon gets hit by these objects daily, but just too small.
The asteroid 2024 YR4. The probability of this 60-meter wide rock crashing into the moon in December 2032 was 4.3%. For orbital mechanics, that's a critical threat level. The moon has no dense atmosphere to tear the object apart. A rock weighing hundreds of thousands of tons would slam into the surface at full speed. The explosion's energy would be around 15 megatons, hundreds of times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The blast would kick up a cloud of debris that could be fatal to lunar orbiting satellites. New radar data from ground-based observatories have allowed us to rewrite the trajectory.
Yep, that's the same thing with the study with Apophis. It's not going to actually hit the moon. It's just going to be close enough to just clip by the moon's orbit, just at a very close approach. But it was just because when you have if it travels too fast, then it can get shifted and just fly off of the orbit of the moon.
Act is canceled. Unfortunately, in my opinion, because that would have been so cool. In December 2032, the asteroid will miss the moon by a mere 21,000 kilometers. By cosmic standards, that's just a hair's breadth away. But orbital mechanics do work flawlessly. There will be no collision. We can calmly and sadly watch the rock fly back away into the darkness. But as it fades away, the night sky is already, thankfully, preparing an entirely different, this time incredibly bright, spectacle for us. On this day, you'll look up and see a blood-red giant dominating the sky. It'll shine so incredibly brightly that it'll start casting its own shadows on Earth. It might seem to you like a supernova exploded out there in space somewhere, or some other mysterious threat is heading our way. But there's no need to panic.
Right.
It's our neighbor, Mars, deciding to break with the usual distance and get up close and personal with the Earth. Normally, Mars hangs out about 225 million kilometers away from us, sometimes retreating as far as 400 million. But this time, it'll reach the closest point to the Sun in its orbit right as the Earth flies directly between them. The distance will shrink fourfold, collapsing to a mere 55.9 million kilometers. In cosmic terms, that's practically...
So this is where Mars's orbit is going to be at its perihelion at its closest approach of the Sun. So, I mean, this it also Earth does that too. You know, it's the changes of eccentricity that happens once every tens of thousands of years, if that. And Mars, I think, experiences different than how Earth's eccentricity is, because it's much wider and it's further away.
Just an arm's length away. This will be the historical record of the century. The last time Mars came this close was back in 2003. In August 2050, you won't need billion-dollar orbital telescopes. Through the cheapest of amateur telescopes, you won't just see a tiny little red dot.
You'll see the whole thing.
Shebang, the angry red planet in all its glory, complete with its ice caps and global dust storms. This close encounter with Mars will be the main astronomical event of 2050.
Wait, is this also by the time where, you know, the plans of colonizing Mars one day, is that also that's going to be in 2050 as well, as that's going to happen?
But 11 years later, the sky will present us with another epic comeback, one humanity has been waiting for over half a century. Can you guess? Yeah, that's right. Halley's Comet.
Halley's Comet.
In the summer of 2061, Halley's Comet will appear again in the night sky. And this ain't just any old flying chunk of ice. It's the first comet in history to prove the universe runs on a very strict schedule. So why and how did it become the most famous comet in history? Well, in this case at least, size really isn't that important. It became famous because it helped humanity stop fearing the heavens. Until the 18th century, comets were considered harbingers of the apocalypse. They appeared out of nowhere and sowed panic in the streets. But astronomer Edmund Halley destroyed that fear with math.
And he is, you know, this guy. This is why it's named Halley's Comet, after Edmund Halley. So again, people's perspective back then, before his discovery of Halley's Comet, and was named after him. You know, people have always thought of these objects as killers. They're like these massive objects that are in around Earth's orbit, and it's going to be, you know, if it falls out of the orbit, it's going to hit us, it's going to destroy things, you know. But still, I mean, this is a object that's just passing by.
That's right.
And by the year 2061, I'll be 57 years old by the time it will make its grand comeback.
It proved that these objects that had so terrified Europeans for centuries, they weren't different omens of doom, but the very same rocks returning again and again on a clockwork schedule. Halley's Comet, tethered to the Sun by an invisible gravitational chain, comes for a return visit every 76 years. And by the way, it's the only comet that a human being has the chance of seeing twice in their lifetime. During its last visit in 1986, it was, frankly, disappointing. Earth and the comet were unfortunately on opposite sides of the sun on that pass, at a massive distance from each other. So for most people on Earth, the legendary comet looked like a tiny, blurry little gray smudge. People had run out and bought binoculars in droves, but even then, seeing anything impressive was difficult, to put it mildly. But in July 2061, orbital mechanics will give us some payback. We'll be on the same side of our star at the perfect distance.
Wow.
We'll finally be able to see.
Hopefully, yeah. By the time I'm 57 years old, I can't wait to see that. Just see this for the first time. Yeah, I mean, this is like once in a lifetime thing, because once this thing passes by, you won't be able to see it again until 76 years, and it's just, it's like a blink you miss, and then you won't be able to see it again for a very long time.
See that magnificently bright tail in all its glory. By the way, that tail is actually the comet boiling alive. As it approaches the sun, this 15-kilometer wide chunk of dirty ice will be roasting in the vacuum of space. It'll shed millions of tons of matter, fly past us, and dive back into the darkness until 2134. It'll leave behind nothing but a long trail of dust.
By the time
Halley's Comet
by the time it will come back, so after 2061 will be 2134. Damn. I mean, I'll be long dead after that. So by the time it's 2134, and I'll be 131 years old. Yeah, I don't want to think about that.
A quiet, predictable show, just ice melting in the void. But for the next item on our calendar, we'll switch genres to something that will show us true primal fury. In 2083, a new star will suddenly flare up there in the skies above the Earth. It'll appear out of nowhere and in a matter of days become the brightest point in the night sky, outshining Sirius and Venus. For a few weeks, this light will alter the familiar pattern of the constellations. You might think it's a supernova, the death throes of a giant star. But this isn't the death of one star. No, this is the catastrophic head-on collision between two. Right now.
And it's similar to the previous one years back, where we experienced almost the same way when you had two binary pair systems trying to be more dominant than the other one. One's much bigger, one's much smaller. One try to steal the bigger one's mass to become more dominant. Then you see the whatever became that one becomes the smaller one. It becomes more dominant than the big one. You can see that vice versa. And then eventually, as they're locked in this gravitational dance, and they start to get closer and closer and closer and closer until they start, bulging each other, and then they start pulling each other in, and then eventually they start to collide.
The V Sagittae system is a pair of dim stars locked in a gravitational death grip. A dead white dwarf is literally sucking the plasma out of its neighbor. Because of this, they're rapidly losing orbital speed and spiraling towards each other. This is going to be so cool. In 2083, the distance between them will drop to 0. The white dwarf will plunge into the core of its neighbor. This isn't just a collision, it's a fatal merger that will trigger a ginormous thermonuclear explosion. Eventually, the glow will gradually fade, leaving behind one star instead of two. This is the largest.
And depends on where it is. Oh, sorry, I paused it. But it just depends on where it is. It still takes a long time for light to travel to reach Earth to actually witness what just happened.
Catastrophe of our century that we'll be able to see with our naked eye, or hopefully you have too. But even this merger of two stars pales in comparison to the event awaiting us next. I can't talk. I'll call you in 5 minutes. In March 2092, those who point their telescopes at Jupiter will see something unthinkable.
I'll be
The
88.
planet's 4 largest moons will disappear, merging into a single gleaming point. After the thermonuclear explosion of V Sagitti, you might think we're going to witness another massive cosmic collision, but this time there will be no catastrophes.
No.
This will be the universe gifting us with a mathematically perfect optical illusion. Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto orbit Jupiter on the same plane. In 2092, Earth will pass perfectly through the plane of their orbits.
Okay.
Orbital rhythms will align in an exceedingly rare
Okay, so yeah, so one single lineup, seeing from Earth's perspective, from our perspective, we start to see that, we start to see all the Galilean moons line up as just one from our perspective.
parade. Some of the moons will pass directly in front of Jupiter's disk, blending into its clouds, while the others will vanish into the giant black shadow behind the planet. Even better, the moons will begin to
By lunar
eclipse
planetary
one another. Massive Ganymede will cast its shadow directly onto the ice of Europa, blocking its light for the earthly observer. This deceptive geometry will only last a couple of hours. Then the moons will emerge from the shadows and the Jupiter system will return to its usual state. We might actually witness with fucking piece of shit. Right now, above us, there are events already set in motion, some unfolding slowly, some building towards moments we might actually witness within our lifetimes. The sky is not static, it's a timeline, and it's moving.
Goes forever.
All it asks is that we remember to glance skyward. By the way, if you're enjoying this new format, I'd be absolutely delighted if you subscribed, turn on notifications, drop a like, and of course, let me know what you think in the comments. Your support really does motivate me to keep creating and to keep making these videos.
But anyway, I want to see what you guys think. What event has surprised you the most, and what events do you want to learn about more? As maybe I might do a new video about galactic star mergers or alignments, or talking about that that was said in this video. Talking about most of that. Talk about Apophis. Talk about videos like that. Is there any other space related topic or a futuristic space video that you guys want me to check out? I mean, my comments are open, so let me know what surprised you, what's your interest. Yeah, and yeah, we're gonna have a safe, civil comment section. Just keep it clean, keep it to a minimal. Well, sorry, well, not to a minimal, but keep it civil. But is there anything you guys want me to check out? And yeah, and as always, keep exploring.